The narwhal has been the focus of many legends, folklore, and myths in the Arctic regions of the world. Its mottled coloring, strange teeth, and overall awkward appearance has mystified our ancestors and continues to pick at our curiosity today. If you've never heard of one, or just know little about them, you're in the right place. Their appearance has given many people the impression that these, in fact, are the unicorns of the sea. Unicorns are just a fable, and I can promise you that there isn't a tiny unicorn hanging out inside of a narwhal. Unlike mythical creatures, narwhals are real. Currently, the IUCN list of threatened species says that there's approximately 80,000 of these animals globally. Also, they're listed as nearly threatened, so they're not quite as in trouble as other animals are, but they suffer losses from hunting, climate change, and industrial activities. Now, I have to tell you, this is probably the strangest marine animals in the sea. I mean, you can disagree with me, but I think they are one of the weirdest. And that's why I want to talk to you guys about it. So before we begin talking about how magnificent these animals are, I kind of want to dabble into taxonomy just a little bit. Now, narwhals are considered marine mammals. So, much like us, they are endothermic, which means that they regulate their own body temperature. At some point in their life, they have had hair, which is hard to believe, but they do. They give birth to live young, and they nurse that young using organs called mammae, or the mammary glands that produce milk, and also that they have adaptations to be fully or semi-aquatic. For example, the modification of limbs to become flippers is one example. Whale-like organisms fall under the category Cetacea, and they all have similar, if not the same, adaptations. So for example, some of the biggest adaptations that cetaceans have are that they have lost their hind limbs. Now, enabled to move in the water efficiently, they have developed flukes, which allow them to propel themselves in the water like so. They have fusiform body shapes, where the center mass of the animal is much wider than the front and back, where they taper off. This is the ideal body shape to reduce drag and for continuous swimming for all life in the sea. So that's what their body shapes typically all look like. Some are bigger, some are more slender, but they're all about the same. Now, narwhals get further down in the taxonomic ladder under the suborder called Odontoceti. These are medium-sized whales, and all of them have melons. And it's this big, bulbous, fatty, tissued organ that sits right in the front of the face, and that allows air in the sinuses to attenuate through this fatty organ and outward into the environment. This allows them to use echolocation for prey detection, obstacle detection, and differences in the density of the water column, such as temperature and salinity. Also, another characteristic of odontocetes is that they have a single blowhole or nasal opening on the top of their head. Now, the biggest identifying factor of all odontocetes is they have teeth. Not baleen, which is a keratin substance that large whales that are considered mysticetes have to filter feed the prey. Now, these guys don't do that. They actively hunt their prey. Now, as we go even further down the taxonomic ladder, you'll find that the narwhal is considered a part of the Monodontidae family, which would be considered your white whales. Now, there's only two members of this family, and both Monodontidae members are polar species. The members are the beluga and then the narwhal. Both of these animals have concave-shaped flukes. They have rounded paddle-like pectoral fins, and they also have the absence of dorsal fin. Also, a really neat fact about the narwhal and the beluga is that both of them do not have fused cervical vertebrae. This allows them to have full range of full range of motion of their neck.
This is a digital image of a fused cervical vertebrae found in the killer whale. This can dramatically inhibit mobility of the neck, but Monodontidae members do not have this, so no need to fear.
So now, let's talk about their scientific name.
Monodon monoceros, which in Latin means one tooth, one horn.
And as you could probably figure out, that they gave them this name because of that magnificent tusk that extends right out of the maxillary bone in their upper lip.
This particular trait sets them apart from the beluga.
Now, this is what many people believe. Because they spend almost all of their time living near or under pack ice, they have lost their dorsal fin. Also, another adaptation for the polar regions and pack ice is the development of blubber. Blubber allows the animal to be insulated with a nice toasty fat layer to keep their heat in. It has been found that the narwhal's blubber layer is about 10 centimeters thick. Now that we know a little bit about their family members, let's talk about their ancestors so that we can try to figure out where these guys came from. In order to do that, we have to jump back in time. So of all the cetaceans that are currently living, they possibly came from 4 separate lineages. These 4 lineages were said to have separated around 30 million years ago. So, if you're still keeping up with me, the white whales, the porpoises, and the ocean dolphins were suggested to have a common ancestor.
This common ancestor was thought to have a homodont dental structure, which means that all their teeth are similar in size and shape.
Which is great and all, but that still doesn't explain the narwhal. The earliest possible ancestor of the narwhal is only found in fossil record, which actually dates back about 5 million years ago in the Pliocene. Within those fossil records, they found Odobenocetops peruvianus, a walrus-like delphinid. So this species had very similar morphological characteristics, such as they exhibited asymmetrical tusk structures that protruded from the premaxilla and pointed posteriorly, meaning towards the back end of the animal, along the side, like you see here. Okay, now that we got all of that out of the way, we can talk about the current narwhals and what they're doing in their day-to-day life. The narwhals are a very social Arctic species, and they are commonly found in regions where pack ice exists. This is typically going to be anywhere from 70 to 80 degrees north. As I mentioned, they're very social, and you won't find them in groups less than 2 or 3, and they average around 12 or so individuals. There's always continuous communication, whether it's during social interactions or hunting or resting. They will continue to communicate with each other. So the narwhals do migrate seasonally, and they do so in these massive groups. So many of these miles have to be traveled underneath of the pack ice. The only time that they stop is to breathe with these tiny little openings in the pack ice that are mainly dug by Arctic seals as breathing holes for themselves. Narwhals are known to have very strong sight fidelity, which means that they don't really ever venture far off their migration course or the site that they're actually going to. So in the fall, they begin to migrate to lower latitudes for the winter. Up to 50,000 whales are known to aggregate in the dense pack ice until spring. So the wintering grounds for narwhals are very important because it is the time of year where the most energy uptake occurs. So narwhals are known to feast on gonadid squid species and the Greenland halibut. Gonadid squids are a very important part of their diet, but the one that is more nutritionally more value is the Greenland halibut because it is very fatty, and all of the wonderful nutrients and vitamins that are found in there allow the narwhals to gain the maximum amount of nutrition needed during the rest of the season and for the following summer to come. This is because when they spend their time in the summer, they're a lot less active and they rarely ever feed. And if they do it sparingly. Sometimes you'll find polar and Arctic cod in their diet, but it's not as common as the first two. It's possible that the narwhals forage at this time because of the predictability behavior of their prey species. Now, their prey species can be found in high densities in these lower latitude areas
along the continental shelf between about 200 and 800 meters depth.
So in order to forage for food, these guys have to dive down deep, and I mean deep. The narwhal species themselves are very accomplished divers. They could dive between, on average around, 800 meters depth. Narwhals have the capability of diving up to 1,800 meters depth just to find food. Okay, so let's talk about their life cycle. Females mature at about 6 to 7 years of age, while the males mature around 9. Mating begins in the spring, and if fertilization is successful, then around 14 to 15 months later, a baby will happen. Baby narwhals are born in midsummer, and they are brownish to dark gray. They really don't look too much like the adults. So the mother will nurse her calf for slightly longer than a year. So after the calf has been weaned, the mother will wait nearly 2 years before she mates again. This may be to maximize juvenile survival rate and be able to teach her offspring how to forage, how to communicate within the subpopulation, and to be a better individual in her pod. Be a better narwhal. So, as the young mature, they will continuously develop a mottled white pigment. So, the light speckled markings will appear on the ventral and lateral surfaces, and a strip of skin that follows along their spine and around their head will still remain a dark pigment. The male pigmentation tends to be a little more on the white side and are going to have larger and heavier bodies. Male narwhals can average about 4.7 meters long and weigh around 1,600 kilograms. Females are going to be smaller and much less heavy. Also, as mentioned before, this magnificent tusk that shoots out from the face of the males is another indicator of sex between individuals. The lifespan of the narwhal is unknown. There was a study that was done. They were able to estimate this particular individual could quite possibly have been 115 years old. All right, now we're on to the good stuff. As I had mentioned before, these guys deviate from any type of normal dental structure within the odontocete suborder. So this dramatic asymmetrical tusk arrangement with a near perfect straight shape is not seen in any extant marine mammal in the world. They're the only ones. So as a fetus, the narwhal had 8 pairs of tooth buds. And as they mature, only 2 will actually form into teeth. And these 2 pairs of teeth will begin to form in the maxilla plate of the upper jaw. These baby narwhals begin life spectacularly weird, which is pretty neat, I think. So the tusks are positioned closer to the tip of the rostrum, and they are along the center line of the animal, which means that it is anterior-medially compared to the vestigial teeth. And the vestigial teeth would be located a little bit further back and laterally. which means the outer part of the face. With development, the tusks will move back in the jaw posteriorly towards the back end of the animal, while still remaining in the maxilla plate of the upper jaw. Both tusks and teeth are impacted. Impacted teeth means that they lay horizontal in the jaw as opposed to vertical, like most other animals, which some of you may have known if you had your wisdom teeth yanked out. And as they lay horizontally, they will grow anteriorly, which means towards the front of the animal. So a unique feature of the vestigial teeth, along with the tusks, is that they don't have an enamel, which many animals have to protect the outer part of the tooth. Narwhal have no need for the enamel because they have cementum, which completely covers the tooth and allows it to attach into the maxilla plate. So let's first talk about the vestigial teeth. So as adults, these vestigial teeth probably only grow about 6 millimeters in length. Now these teeth remain embedded in the maxilla plate in the upper jaw and are held in open sockets in the maxilla. So they're not very sturdy, and that's why sometimes in some animals, a tooth or both teeth have fallen out. So in the modern narwhal, there is no identifiable function for these vestigial teeth because of the random crown shape. It's weird root formation, the replacement of enamel coating for cementum, and it's just different tooth morphology in general leads many researchers to think that these have no purpose in modern narwhals. All right, now we're going to talk about the tusks. One of the most interesting things about the narwhal is their single huge tusk. Now, 2 tusks are found in every narwhal individual that has been observed, but it's only in males where the tusk on the left side in the jaw erupts directly outward. The tusks can be anywhere from 2 to 3 meters long. The base diameter is about 6 centimeters and evenly tapers to about 1.6 centimeters at the tippity top. Subadult and female tusks will remain embedded within the maxilla plate of their upper jaw. There have been reports of females with tusks, though, and also there have been reports where males actually have 2, but it's very rare. So let's just talk very briefly about normal tusk formation in other animals. As the tusk grows, there's continued deposition of material at the root of the tusk structure. And this deposition is never perfect. There's going to be irregularities as it grows. So it will end up curving, much like the walrus, the babirusa, or the elephant. This sort of bulky curvature structure can hinder hydrodynamics significantly. If a tusk twists as it grows outward, around the base, there will be areas where there's faster and slower growth. So it's believed that any imbalances in growth speed around the base of the tusk will be compensated for, thus creating a straight axis. Tusks always will grow in a left-handed helix shape that is completely straight. This characteristic of the tusk makes them very, very strong. And these tusks have the capability of withstanding very high flexural stresses. Now, because the tusk is in a circular-like shape, algal deposits sometimes occur on the tusks because of the ridges and valleys. In this picture here, you can easily see it. It's never a good thing when algae starts growing on your teeth, right? How do they avoid it? It's most likely taken care of by a behavior only seen in males called tusking. This is where males rub their tusks together in a non-aggressive manner as an attempt to limit algal growth on their tusks. It's just weird. So some proof of this is that from collected samples, tusks have shown signs of even abrased surfaces, and it could be from fighting, but if it were fighting, it wouldn't be as uniform along the surface of the tusk. No conclusive visual data has been confirmed, so researchers have hypothesized that this is a male behavior to basically maintain and take good care of their tusks. So why did this adaptation occur? So we've only been able to develop hypotheses for such an incredible adaptation because of the fact that there's little to no ancestral data and direct observation is limited because these guys are deep diving Arctic species. So this phenotype uniqueness between males and females could quite possibly be a byproduct of sexual selection. So this basically means that there's external factors rather than a genetic mutation causing this morphological structure to occur. Most accepted hypothesis for narwhal dentation formation is male-to-male aggression, dominance, and sexual selection. So could social behavior truly drive such an extreme adaptation? Well, for a quick little example, we can use some terrestrial animals such as lions and peacocks. The lions have the mane to make themselves look very big, manly, and then you look at the peacocks and they have this tail with vibrant colors and it's just beautiful. So these two specific species look separately because each of these qualities means something to the females. So ideal mates are those that show dominance and have high fitness, and they provide beneficial genetic material for the new generation to come. So the dentation in narwhals is believed to be driven by male-to-male aggression, diet, and sexual selection. So simple indicators of all three of these reasons to drive this adaptation is that there are scars found near the head of most, if not all, males. This may signify that the use of these tusks are for fighting. So their diet consists of bottom-dwelling fish and squid, and these types of fish don't necessarily need teeth to consume. Also, in terms of sexual selection, males who have the longest tusks are thought to be more ideal mates in the lady narwhal mindset. Sexual dimorphic structures can be greater signs of quality to avoid costly and potentially fatal fights between male individuals. So the benefit of having a weapon-like structure, such as the narwhal tusk, can truly only be beneficial to those whose teeth aren't required solely for feeding, if that makes any sense. So, to explain this a little further, vestigial teeth, along with the embedded or erupted tusks, were not found to have any chewing function whatsoever, otherwise known as mastication. Whales that use their teeth for catching and consuming their food most likely won't develop male quality indicators. For those who consume more structured foods, the importance of feeding is more beneficial than the high energetic cost of developing dental weapons for dominance. So this allowed the narwhal to have a greater importance in sexual signaling, to avoid escalating fights, and to reduce the risk of self-injury. So because really the males have to fight for their right to party. No, I'm just kidding. Because the males are fighting to have the opportunity to mate with as many females as possible, the females and subadults don't need tusks. And you can see that females and subadults don't have tusks. This further suggests that the dental structure in the narwhal plays no part in feeding. Okay, even though I've kind of hinted at it, I need to clarify something before we go any further. This is not a horn. I repeat, it is not a horn. And if I must, I will explain to you now. Development in the microstructure of the tusks themselves distinguishes them as being dental in origin and not a keratinized horn like you would find in rhinoceros or a unicorn. So their tusks consist of dentin, with many tubule networks. which is much like many other animals in the animal kingdom who have teeth. The tusks are held in place in a portion of the jaw in alveolar sockets, which actually contains the root portion of the tusk. So, with all of that being said, because of their location and development, researchers have learned that the tusks are actually canines. Now, why do the narwhals live in this frigid pack ice habitat in the Arctic? I mean, as humans, it sounds like an awful idea. But to the narwhal, the pack ice provides shelter from rough seas and potential predators. And they do actually have the ability to break through thin layers of pack ice with their head and their back. But if the ice tends to grow a lot faster than anticipated, then they cannot create openings for themselves. This limits their breathing opportunities. With that being said, during periods of very rapid ice formation, there are records of many subpopulations of narwhals experience mass mortality events from ice entrapment and eventually die from asphyxiation. So this is a big issue in terms of population decline because of the narwhal's specific habitat and climate change. So factors such as the one I had just talked about have caused researchers to consider the narwhal a extremely vulnerable species because of climate change. Now, in order to classify an organism as vulnerable, they must meet a specific type of criteria. So the criteria that a species must follow under in order to be considered a vulnerable species, especially in times of climate change.
The criteria is as follows. 1. Specialized habitat requirements. 2. Narrow environmental tolerances. 3. Dependence of specific cues that will be disrupted by climate change. 4. Dependence on inter- and intraspecific interactions that will be disrupted by climate change. And 5. The poor ability to disperse or colonize in more suitable habitats.
Unfortunately, the narwhal seems to follow under almost every single one of these criteria. They are known to be one of the most specialized Arctic cetaceans, and they live in a very restricted distribution. Makes them very vulnerable, unfortunately. Narwhals have been known to be very reliable prey sources for hunters. And this species is a very large part of indigenous cultures within Arctic Canada and Greenland. Narwhal hunting was done almost completely opportunistically. They would actively follow the whale, but it was never a commercial fishery. About the 1970s, that actual regulated protection and restrictions on narwhal hunting began. Since then, quotas have fluctuated approximately between 500 to 100 animals per year. And between 1996 and 2007, it was found that the average amount of narwhal takes were 373 individuals per year. Narwhals are still hunted and have a high economic value for the indigenous people there for maktak and their ivory. Currently, narwhal product trade is strictly monitored with permits for import and export through CITES. With increasing human populations and technology, more strict narwhal harvest regulations must be implemented. Also, another big factor needs to be taken account is sustainable yield estimates for this particular population. It takes a female narwhal to begin mating 2 years after her offspring has grown up. So it will take a long time for a population to bounce back. So in order to implement such strategies, more data ultimately has to be collected. Things that could be important would be reproductive behavior in males and females, birth rates, juvenile survival rates, population dynamics. Also, another thing that we need to look at is climate change. Trends in pack ice. Narwhal site fidelity is also a big issue with these guys in terms of vulnerability. These are all things that are important. Even though those are a lot of factors, all of which need to be equally considered for the conservation of narwhal species. So that's it, guys. Thanks for checking out my channel and sticking with me to the end, because I know it's a lot of information. But the biggest thing I want you guys to take out of this is that not everything in the ocean will live forever, especially those who are very habitat specific, like the narwhal. And if things aren't done in terms of conservation soon, these animals might not be around long enough that your children's children's children will be able to experience these guys naturally in the wild. I hope you took something out of this and you learned something new and you could tell your friends at the bus stop. Hope you have a lovely day, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.